In the spring of 2022, I got a call from a woman I will call Debra. She had grown up 2 hollers over from where I live now, worked 22 years at a textile plant in Harlan that closed in 2018. She was 51 years old, living on $890 a month from a disability check, and her landlord had just handed her a 60-day notice. The rent on the 2-room house she had been in for 11 years was going from $580 to $875. She called me because people in this county have been calling the Combs women when they do not know where else to turn for about 4 generations now. What she asked me was not, "Can you help me find an apartment?" There were no apartments. What she asked me was this: "Ruth, is there something I can build?" I told her yes. I told her what kind of structure she was looking for, what to search for, what the county code said about permits, and what she needed to do in what order. 8 months later, Debra was sleeping under a metal roof in an insulated structure with solar-powered lights and water collected from the sky. She paid $387 for the entire build. She has not paid rent since. I am going to show you exactly what she built, how she built it, and how you could do the same thing. My name is Ruth Combs. My family has farmed the same hollow in Harlan County, Kentucky for 4 generations. My great-great-grandfather, Ezra Combs, built the first structure on this land in the 1890s with timber he cut off the hillside himself. And a saying I heard from the time I could walk: a man who cannot build it with his own hands does not truly own it. He did not have a contractor. He did not have a permit. He had a piece of mountain, a cross-cut saw, and the knowledge to use them. When I was a girl following my grandmother Loretta up the root cellar steps, I used to run my hand along the hewn beams of that old porch addition, the notches Ezra cut by hand, tight as a closed fist. Loretta would say, "You feel that? That is what permanent looks like." What she meant was that nobody could take it because it cost nobody anything to give it. That is still happening, and in a few minutes I am going to show you exactly how. Now, here is what the housing market looks like in rural Appalachia right now, and in rural Mississippi and rural Alabama, and most of rural America outside the cities that get written about in the newspapers. A 2-room rental in Harlan County in 2024 runs between $600 and $900 a month. The median individual income in this county is just over $18,000 a year. That is $1,500 a month before taxes. After taxes, after food, after a car payment to get to work on roads that require a vehicle, after the electric bill, there is not much left. When a landlord raises rent by $75, the math stops working. Not slowly, all at once. The shelter system here is not equipped for what the economy has done to this region since the mines closed. Waiting lists run 6 to 12 weeks. The nearest open bed is often 30 miles away on a 2-lane road with no bus service. Taking that bed means losing the job. Losing the job means never getting out of the shelter. And so people end up in their cars, in relatives' living rooms, in trailers without heat, in places most Americans would not believe exist 40 miles off the interstate. I am not going to tell you what I am fixing to show you is a policy solution. It is not. It is a building method. It is what people reach for when every other door is closed and they are standing in a field trying to figure out what comes next. The structure I am going to describe is built from a damaged shipping container. A standard 20-foot steel shipping container in good condition sells for $1,500 to $3,000 at a surplus yard. But containers that cycle out of commercial service with dented wall panels, surface rust, or door frames that need adjustment sell for a fraction of that, sometimes as low as $200 to $300, because commercial buyers will not touch them. The cosmetic damage disqualifies them from the cargo resale market. The structural steel is fine. The marine-grade plywood floor is fine. The frame is engineered to hold 67,000 pounds of cargo, stacked 4 containers high on a ship in open ocean. A dented side panel does not change any of that. Surplus containers move through government auctions, logistics yards, and online platforms constantly. In the Gulf Coast states, where container traffic through ports like Gulfport and Mobile runs heavy, damaged units come available year-round. In Kentucky, both Louisville and Cincinnati have container surplus operations within a half-day's drive of Harlan. The containers are there. Most people simply have never been told to look. Now, here is the part most folks have never been told. In most rural counties in this country, not cities, rural counties, zoning ordinances do not require a building permit for a structure under 200 square feet that is not connected to municipal water or sewer. A standard 20-foot shipping container has a footprint of 160 square feet. That falls beneath the threshold. That is not a loophole. That is the actual code, written for agricultural outbuildings and storage structures, that has existed in rural zoning law for decades. You do not need to file paperwork. You do not need a licensed inspector standing in your field. You need a piece of ground and permission from the person who owns it. Which brings me to the piece of this that surprises people who have not spent time in rural communities. In Harlan County, as in rural Mississippi and rural Louisiana, there is land sitting unused by people who cannot maintain it. Elderly owners whose children moved to Lexington or Louisville decades ago. Property that has not been farmed since the mines closed and the young people left. Brush growing up along fence lines. County notices about overgrown lots stacking up in mailboxes. What those property owners often want is not money. They want maintenance. They want someone to cut the grass along the road frontage, check the fence posts after a hard rain, drive them to an appointment in Harlan on a Tuesday when their daughter cannot come from Lexington. They want to know something useful is happening on the lands their parents worked. Debra knocked on 11 doors on the county roads outside Harlan before she found what she needed. A retired miner owned 6 acres off a gravel road that had not been touched in 8 years. Brush had taken the back half. The county had sent him notices. She offered to clear the brush, maintain his access road, and check on his house when the weather turned hard. In exchange, he let her place her container on the back 2 acres with access to his outdoor water spigot and a single electrical outlet on the side of his barn. No lease, no paperwork, a handshake. This kind of arrangement is older than this county. My grandmother Loretta made arrangements like this her whole life. A quart of elderberry syrup for the use of a neighbor's spring house. 2 weeks of helping with fall canning in exchange for a corner of someone's root cellar. The currency was usefulness. It still is. Now I want to walk you through what the build actually looks like, because the steps matter, and they matter in order. The first task is cutting your ventilation openings. You do this before anything else goes inside. A sealed shipping container in a Kentucky July is a steel oven. An unmodified container in a January wind is a box that sweats on the inside and soaks everything you own within a single season. You need 2 window openings before you do another thing, roughly 24 by 36 inches each, cut with an angle grinder. That work takes 1 full Saturday. Borrow the grinder if you do not own one. Any auto body man, any equipment rental shop, any man at your church who works on cars will have one. Wear safety glasses. Use chalk and blue painter's tape to mark your lines before you make a single cut. Measure twice. The steel does not forgive mistakes the way wood does. If you want a standard residential door rather than the original container doors, you will need to widen the existing frame by about 8 inches on one side to accept a standard exterior door. Habitat for Humanity Restore locations carry exterior doors for $15 to $40. A steel security door is better than a wood one. They show up in demolition dumpsters at commercial buildings regularly if you are paying attention and have told people you are looking. The second task is insulation, and this is where most amateur container builds fail. It is also where Grandmother Loretta's way of thinking about the world saves you more than $1,000. Steel conducts heat and cold with brutal efficiency. In a Kentucky July, the interior of an uninsulated container can reach temperatures that are genuinely dangerous. In January, the walls radiate cold inward and create condensation that drips from the ceiling all night. The insulation is not optional. It is the difference between a shelter and a problem you moved into. Spray foam insulation is the correct product for metal structures. It bonds directly to steel and creates a seamless air barrier. Professionally installed, it costs $1 to $2 per square foot. For a 20-foot container, that runs well over $1,000. But here's what Loretta would have known before she ever priced a professional quote. She kept a standing rule in this hollow: never pass a dumpster without looking in it. Never walk past a contractor's truck without asking what they were throwing away. She collected half-used cans of wood stain, partial boxes of nails, leftover rolls of tar paper, things other people treated as garbage and she treated as resources. I watched her do it from the time I was small enough to have to trot to keep up with her. That was not poverty. That was knowledge about where value actually lives. Insulation contractors who run residential attic jobs generate 3 to 5 partially used cans of spray foam per job. Contractors cannot resell opened product. They throw it away. 3 or 4 insulation contractors in any county will say yes if you ask them directly for their discarded partial cans. Over 4 to 6 weeks of collecting, you will have enough spray foam to insulate the ceiling and upper wall sections of a 20-foot container. The lower walls you insulate with rigid foam board salvaged from renovation dumpsters, the kind that gets torn off walls during a remodel and thrown in a pile outside. Cut to fit with a utility knife and glued to the steel with construction adhesive. Cover everything with pallet wood planking for a finished interior surface. Pallets are free behind grocery stores and feed stores in every county in this country. They are considered waste by the people stacking them out back. They are not waste. Before the foam board goes in, install a vapor barrier. This is 6 mil plastic sheeting, the same material used under concrete slabs, stapled to your interior framing before anything else goes up. A 50-foot roll costs about $18 at any hardware store. It creates an air gap that prevents moisture from reaching the steel. Without it, mold grows inside your walls within the first year. With it, 4 Kentucky winters later, there is nothing growing in there but what you put there yourself. The vapor barrier costs $18 and solves the problem that destroys most amateur container builds within their first winter. Water comes from the sky. That is not a metaphor. Aluminum gutter sections run along both long sides of the container roof and angle toward the rear corners, where 2 55-gallon food-grade plastic drums sit on cinder block platforms at ground level. The drums come free from food processing operations, catfish plants, pickle manufacturers, any industrial food facility that cycles through bulk containers. A mesh screen over each drum opening keeps debris out. Kentucky receives an average of 48 inches of rainfall per year. A 20-foot container roof captures roughly 8 square feet of water per inch of rainfall. Over a full year, That is more than enough for 2 people, supplemented by occasional fills from the property owner's spigot. You purify collected rainwater with unscented bleach, 8 drops per gallon, 30 minutes before drinking. The USDA Extension Service has published this method since the 1970s. Annual purification cost runs about $5. Now here is the part about electricity, and I want you to listen carefully because it requires the same shift in thinking as the insulation. Solar installation companies replace panels regularly, storm damage, warranty upgrades, production redesigns. A panel operating at 60% of its rated output gets pulled from a customer's rooftop because the company guaranteed full production. But 60% of a 300-watt panel is still 180 watts. That is more than enough to charge batteries, run LED lighting, power a small fan, and keep phones charged. 2 solar companies in any county with active residential installation work will have pulled panels stacked behind their warehouses. Both will give them away because disposal actually costs them money. 4 salvaged panels on a simple south-facing wooden frame, wired through a $35 charge controller to 2 used car batteries from an auto salvage yard at $15 each, will power LED light strips, a USB charging station, and a 12-volt fan through a Kentucky summer. I am not going to tell you this replaces grid electricity. It does not. You will not run a window air conditioner or a chest freezer from this system. What it does is keep the lights on after dark, keep your devices charged, and run the fan that makes August in an insulated metal box something your children can sleep through without complaint. That is not nothing. That is the difference between surviving and getting rest. Cooking runs on a 2-burner propane camp stove mounted on a plywood counter built against the front wall. A 20-pound tank lasts roughly 6 weeks of regular cooking. Refills run $15 at any gas station. Annual cooking fuel cost is approximately $130. That is less than a single week's electricity bill on a standard utility grid. Now let me be honest about what this is not, because I will not have you build something on the wrong expectation. This is not a house. It is 160 square feet of dry, insulated, powered shelter. It is the thing you have when what you had before was a parking lot and a car seat. It is the beginning of a story, not the end of one. It requires land, and in cities that land is not accessible the way it is in rural counties. Every advantage this method has, the relaxed permit threshold, the informal land arrangement, the industrial waste streams of free building materials, the neighbors willing to make a handshake trade instead of filing a lease, all of that exists specifically in rural areas. In a city, every one of those conditions reverses. I am not going to pretend otherwise, and honest is better than impressive. It requires physical work over several months. Not skilled work. Debra had never operated an angle grinder before this build, but sustained, patient, physical work. If that is not possible for someone, this is not their tool. And it requires research before you spend $1. County permit thresholds vary. Before you purchase anything, pull up your county zoning ordinance online or go to the courthouse and ask for the accessory structure permit threshold. Know what the code says before you pick up a phone. This is a quiet tool. It is not a fast one. Know what it is for and it will serve you. Ask it to do something it cannot and it will disappoint you. Now here is the part I have to say plainly, because I spent 5 years as a licensed practical nurse in Lexington, and I watched this from inside the system. There is a housing market in this country, a rental market and a mortgage market and a manufactured housing market. Every one of those systems is built on your monthly payment. The return on investment requires that you pay regularly, indefinitely. A structure you own outright bought for $250 from a surplus yard and built with borrowed tools and materials that everyone else threw away, generates no payment for any institution. There is no revenue in your self-sufficiency for anyone who profits from your dependence. The knowledge to build a livable structure from salvaged materials has existed in this country since before there was a country. Ezra Combs built this farmhouse without a contractor. Aunt Bertie, the Cherokee woman who taught my grandmother Loretta her herbal medicine, whose real name nobody in the holler remembered, who everyone just called Aunt Bertie, she also taught Loretta how to read a structure for winter tightness, what gaps to seal, what roof pits shed water in a mountain rain, what to build so that no one could take it. That knowledge was complete. It was practical. It was passed down. What happened to it is not a conspiracy. Nobody came to Harlan County and stole the building knowledge out of people's hands. What happened is that the industrial economy made it cheaper and easier to pay for housing than to build it. For a few decades, that was true enough. Wages were high enough and credit was loose enough that buying made sense. Then the mines closed. Then the wages dropped. Then the credit dried up. And a generation of people found themselves in a position their great-grandparents would have recognized immediately. No money, needing shelter, standing on land but without the knowledge of what to do next, because nobody had thought to pass it down, because nobody had thought they would need it. That is not a conspiracy. It is just how the money flows. My grandmother Loretta never had a mortgage. She slept every night of her adult life in a house that belonged to this family because this family built it, on land that belonged to this family because this family worked it. She did not think of this as an achievement. She thought of it as the minimum. A woman who can house and feed her family from her own land does not need to ask permission from anyone. That is what she believed. That is what she taught me. And she would not be surprised to see the knowledge coming back. She would only be surprised it was ever considered lost. So here is what I want you to do. First, look up your county's zoning ordinance this week. Search your county name and agricultural building exemption or accessory structure permit threshold. Write down the square footage limit. That one number changes everything about what is possible on a piece of land. Second, search for container surplus auctions in your region. Search government surplus shipping container auction plus your state. Look at the listings for damaged or cosmetic condition units. You are not buying yet. You are learning the landscape. Third, if you are in a rural area, start paying attention to unused land around you. You do not need to own it. You need a willing owner and something to offer in return. Think about what you can do. Think about what you have to give. The trade has been going on in this part of the world for 200 years, and it still works. Fourth, visit your nearest Habitat for Humanity restore and your county's solid waste facility. Tell them you are looking for rigid foam board, exterior doors, and aluminum gutter sections coming out of demolition. Get your name on the list. Materials appear when people know you are looking for them. Fifth, pull a YouTube video on off-grid solar wiring for beginners. Watch it until you can draw the diagram from memory. The knowledge is free and it is there, and all it requires is that you treat it like it matters. Until then, find out what your county's permit threshold is, because that one number changes what is possible on any piece of ground you can stand on. Tell me in the comments, have you ever considered building your own structure, or do you know someone in your community who has? Tell me what part of the country you are in and what the obstacle looks like from where you stand. Because the women who kept this country alive through hard winters and harder years knew things we are only just beginning to remember. Don't let it die with a generation.